back to Giants Latest, and class is in session for our history rewind, where we're going through and talking about some of the New York Giants legends who made the franchise what it is today. I want to talk about a couple running backs today. We're going to talk about Joe Morris and Tiki Barber. Of course, we all know Saquon Barkley, we know Ahmad Bradshaw and Otis Anderson, but we need to talk about guys like Joe Morris because this guy was a legend and had an incredible New York Giants career. So much so that he holds 19 New York Giants franchise records. Do you want to hear what they are? I think you do. So let's run through them all quickly and then we'll go through the rest of his New York Giants career. So he holds the records for most rush attempts during a playoff career, which is 140, most rush attempts during a playoff season, which is 73 in 1986, most rushing yards during the playoff career, 553, most rushing yards during the playoff season, 313, also during 1986, most rushing yards during attempt during a playoff game, which is 6.63, in 1987, most rushing touchdowns throughout a season, 21 in 1985, most rushing touchdowns during the playoff career, which is 4, which is also tied with Brandon Jacobs, most rushing touchdowns during a playoff season, also 4 in 1986, most rushing touchdowns during a playoff game was 2 during 1987, also tied with Rodney Hampton. Most rushing yards per game during his playoff career, which is 79. Most total touchdowns per season is 21 in 1985. Most total touchdowns during a playoff season is 4, which is 1986, tied with Brandon Jacobs and Hakeem Nicks. Most 100 plus yard rushing games in a season is 9 in 1986, also tied with Tiki Barber. Most 100 plus yards rushing games during the playoffs, 2, and that's also tied with Otis Anderson and Tiki Barber. Most games with 1 plus touchdown scored during a season is 13, also 1986, tied with Otis Anderson. Most games with 2 plus touchdowns scored during his career, 15, also tied with Brandon Jacobs. Most games with 2 plus touchdowns scored in a season, 7, which was 1985. Most games with 3 plus touchdowns scored during his career, which is 6. And most games with 3 plus touchdowns scored during a season, which was 4 in 1985. So obviously, I'm sure you can tell by now that 1986 was an incredible season. So was 1985 for Joe Morris. But of course, 1986 was when they won the Super Bowl. So he was drafted in 1982 by the New York Giants in the second round. He was the 45th pick. He played with the Giants for 8 years from 1982 to 1989. During that time, he won the Super Bowl. He was a first-team All-Pro in 1986. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler in 1985 and 1986. In 1985, he was also the NFL's rushing touchdown leader. He is in the New York Giants Ring of Honor, and then, of course, has some other accolades throughout college. But Joe Morris obviously had an incredible career with the Giants. His rushing yards include almost 5,600, which is averaging 4 yards per attempt. And then he had 50 touchdowns. So this is a guy who I think needs to be discussed more. Obviously, he played in the 80s with the Giants during that stretch where they had some good years and then some not some good years. But he did win a Super Bowl on that incredible 1986 team. And I know a lot when it's talked about the 86 and the 90s Super Bowl, the Giants defense is talked about a lot, but the Giants offense also deserves to be talked about a lot because, you hear Phil Simms, obviously, in the Super Bowl, he went 22 of 25. You can't do that unless you have amazing wide receivers who are catching the ball on almost every single attempt. His completion rate, I think, was almost 89%. On top of that, he talked about how he had a running back like Joe Morris who would just kind of plow through people and get the job done. All of that comes into handy, and they had a really amazing offense that helped them win the 1986 Super Bowl where they put up 39 points and beat the Denver Broncos. And Joe Morris was a really big part of that. So he's a guy that should be discussed more, I think, throughout his career with the Giants. Like I said, he had almost 5,600 yards, 50 touchdowns, Super Bowl champion, and he also has some amazing New York Giants record that he set throughout the time. Unfortunately, his career ended a little bit on a bummer. He did end up having an injury, and then in 1991 he signed with the Browns, but that's why he was not a part of the 1990 Super Bowl New York Giants team that ended up to beat the Bills. But he was a big player in the Giants, winning so many games, and of course them winning the Super Bowl in '86. So Joe Morris, do not forget him. He deserves to be discussed. Now, here is a New York Giants name that I don't think will ever be forgotten. Running back Tiki Barber. There is a lot to discuss about Tiki Barber. And I know we think Joe Morris is impressive. He holds 19 New York Giants records. Do you know who holds 22 New York Giants franchise records? Tiki Barber. So let's go through them. And I think these are interesting. So I'll make it quick running through these, but I think like once you kind of go through and see what they did in the regular season and the playoffs, it's really amazing. Like the Giants have been a team that obviously have been tough lately, but they have such a rich history with these legendary, incredible players who had amazing careers with the New York Giants that, you know what, if we can't enjoy it now, at least we can enjoy the past. So let's talk more about Tiki. So these are his 22 Giants franchise records. Most rush attempts throughout his career, 2,217. Most rush attempts throughout a season, 357, which is during 2005. Most rush yards throughout a career, 10,449. Most rush yards during a season, 1,860, which was also during 2005. Most rush yards per game, 234, which was in 2006 at Washington. Most rush yards per attempt throughout his career, 4.71. Most rush yards per attempt during a playoff season, 5.27 during 2006. Most rush yards per game throughout his career, 67.9. Most rush yards per game during a season, 116.3 during 2005. Most rush yards per game during a playoff season was 137 during 2006. Most rush yards from scrimmage throughout his career, over 15,000. Most rush yards from scrimmage during a season was over 2,000, which was in 2005. Most rush yards from a scrimmage during a game, 258. 2006, that same game at Washington. Most yards from scrimmage throughout his playoff career, 671. Most all-purpose yards throughout his career, which is over 17,000. Most all-purpose yards during a season, which was that 2005 season where he had 2,390. Most all-purpose yards per game, 258. Again, that game against Washington where he just went off. If you guys want to ever go back and watch it, it is the game from December 30th in 2006 at Washington. You might be able to watch it on YouTube. Most punt return yards per season, 506 in 1999. Most 100-plus rushing yard games throughout his career, which was 40. Most 100-plus yard rushing games throughout a season, 9. 2004 and 2006, he's tied with Joe Morris, like we just discussed. Most 100-plus rushing yard per games during the playoffs, he has 2 games, again, tied with Otis Anderson and Joe Morris, also discussed. And then lastly, most 1,000-plus rushing yards seasons throughout his career, which was 6, more than Saquon Barkley. Okay, anyway, let's talk more about, of course, Tiki Barber. So, Tiki in 1997 was a second-round draft pick by the Giants. He was the 36th overall pick. He played with the Giants for 9 years, from 1997 to 2006, before he ended up retiring, although he did attempt to make a comeback in 2011, and that didn't end up working out for him. In 2005, he was a first-team All-Pro. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler from 2004 to 2006. He is in the Giants Ring of Honor, and like Joe Morris, he also has a lot of fantastic accolades throughout college. His career stats throughout New York Giants history are 10,449 rushing yards, averaging 4.7 per attempt. He had 55 rushing touchdowns, was also used a bit as a wide receiver. He had 586 receptions for 5,183 yards and 12 touchdowns. So obviously we all know Tiki. We all know he had a really impressive, incredible career with the New York Giants. The thing that is disappointing about Tiki, and I know that a lot of fans feel this way about OBJ, is that unfortunately their career with the Giants ended maybe not the way that all of us hoped it would, right? So for OBJ, of course, he got traded after Dave Gettleman said that we didn't sign him to trade him. This is why we have trust issues. Then Tiki retired in 2006. And then, of course, in 2007, the Giants go ahead and win the Super Bowl. Now, there's been some discussions around, the Giants maybe would have won the Super Bowl. Maybe they wouldn't have won the Super Bowl, whether or not Tiki was there. But the biggest discussion around Giants fans are the comments that Tiki Barber made about Eli Manning after he retired. They were comments that were not great. So let's go through them between Tiki and Eli, because I think this is kind of interesting. And I also think that we need to discuss it because I hear so many fans say, oh, well, Tiki sucks because of his comments on Eli. But they've been forgiven. Okay, so let's start here. So in 2007, Tiki publicly criticized Eli Manning's leadership, calling his attempts at motivational speeches comical. He also criticized Coach Tom Coughlin. So then Eli Manning responds, because if you remember at this time, Tiki retired and decided that he was going to go into entertainment and wanted to be on television. So Eli responded saying he was happy that Barber was transitioning to TV and questioned whether Barber would have had anything to say about other teams, because when he transitioned, I guess his focus was mostly on the Giants. So then Tiki Barber goes and he retracts his comments. He apologized for them, saying that they were misconstrued and that he didn't mean to offend. So then years back, Eli Manning says that he acknowledged that Barber had saved him early in his career and made him look better at times. So I think, look, there's always going to be there always can be, I think, maybe some sort of conflict between players on a football team. It's not the first time we've seen it, and it's not the last time we've seen it. Ideally, you resolve those things in-house and you don't go to the media and talk about them. But, there's always been things that have come out. We can go as recently as Malik Neighbors last year, essentially shitting on his head coach, Brian Daboll, about the fact that he wasn't giving him the ball during the game. So, they're young, they learn their lesson. Now, Tiki obviously knows better. And this is the way that I see it, is that Eli Manning gets the laugh in the end, right? Tiki Barber retires, talks shit about Eli. Eli Manning says, kiss my ass, bro. I won a Super Bowl without you, right? So Eli gets the last laugh. And I think as Giants fans, we also get the last laugh, right? Tiki had this amazing career with the Giants. He had the opportunity to stay another year with the Giants and decided, he had some injury issues and things like that. I don't think it had anything to do with Eli. And so he ends up retiring. And as Giants fans, we still got to watch the Giants win a Super Bowl. So I think that also enough time has passed at this point. Tiki's around the Giants facility a lot. He's obviously on WFAN. He seems to have good relationships with the people in the building. It sounds like him and Eli Manning worked everything out. And look, you can forgive and forget. You can forgive and not forget. But I do think it's unfortunate that Tiki's career, which was so successful with the Giants, ended up being overshadowed by these comments that he made. Now, I dislike anyone who talks shit about Eli Manning because he doesn't deserve it, especially his own teammate. But I also think that you can look at Tiki's career and say he had an incredible career with the Giants. I think he learned his lesson to not say things like that. And look, Eli is tough. He can handle it. And again, Eli got the last laugh. He got the Super Bowl a year later. And not only that, he won the Super Bowl MVP. So I think it's fair to say who ended up having the better career and who got to end on a high note, which of course was none other than Eli Manning. But, Tiki Barber is one of those historic New York Giants legends who had an incredible career, and I think is someone that should be talked about for his career with the Giants, not for stupid comments that he made about Eli Manning and the coach at the time. Because like I said, they both got their Super Bowls and Tiki didn't. So let me know what you guys think about this. And tomorrow we will get back into some more New York Giants legends. So hit the subscribe button for more.